My story begins on what should have been an ordinary Friday evening, but instead became the night that shattered the foundation of everything I had built over 15 years. You might think I am sharing this to gain sympathy or validation, but that is not my intention. This account serves as a testament to what happens when boundaries are crossed and disrespect infiltrates a marriage that once seemed unbreakable. I want others to understand that standing firm in your convictions does not make you controlling. It makes you a person of principle. My name is Michael Harrington. At 43 years old, I had what many would consider an enviable life, a successful career as a senior project manager at a construction development firm, a spacious home in an upscale neighborhood outside Boston, a beautiful 13-year-old daughter named Sophia, and what I believed to be a strong marriage to my wife, Rebecca. We had been together since our sophomore year of college, building our relationship through the typical hurdles of early career struggles, the adjustment to parenthood, and the comfortable routine that eventually settles over long-term couples. Rebecca worked as a marketing executive for a prominent retail chain, a position that often required networking events and social gatherings. Throughout our marriage, I had always supported her career ambitions, encouraging her independence and celebrating her successes. We maintained a balance that seemed to work: family dinners when possible, shared responsibility for Sophia, and an understanding that maintaining individual interests kept our relationship fresh. At least that was what I believed until that fateful night at Elevation, the newest high-end nightclub in downtown Boston that had become the weekend hotspot for professionals looking to unwind. The day started like many others. Rebecca mentioned over breakfast that she would be attending a work-related happy hour that would likely extend into the evening. "Just some team bonding with the new marketing associates," she explained, sipping her coffee while reviewing emails on her phone. "Might be a late one, so do not wait up." I thought nothing of it. These events were common in her industry, and I had no reason to question her. Sophia had a sleepover planned with her friend's family, which meant I had the evening to myself. A rare occurrence that I intended to spend catching up on work projects and perhaps watching that documentary series I had been putting off for weeks. Around 7 that evening, I received a text from James Donnelly, a colleague who had recently transferred to our Boston office. "Hitting Elevation tonight with some clients. Heard it's the place to be. You should join if you're free." The invitation seemed fortuitous, a chance to network while enjoying an evening out. I texted back my acceptance, planning to arrive around 10 after finishing some proposal reviews. When I walked into Elevation just after 10:30, the club was pulsating with energy. The space was architecturally impressive. High ceilings with exposed industrial beams, strategic lighting that created an atmosphere of exclusive intimacy despite the crowds, and a central bar that served as the hub around which everything else revolved. James had secured a VIP section on the mezzanine level, which offered a perfect vantage point of the entire club, including the main dance floor below. I spotted James with his clients and made my way toward their table, navigating through clusters of well-dressed professionals. That was when I noticed a familiar figure on the dance floor. Rebecca, in a form-fitting black dress I did not recognize, her hair styled differently than when she had left home that morning. She was dancing with a man I had never seen before, tall, athletic build, with the confident posture of someone accustomed to attention. My initial reaction was confusion rather than anger. Rebecca had mentioned a work event, not a night of clubbing. Perhaps the happy hour had evolved, as these things sometimes do. I watched for a moment, trying to gauge the situation before making my presence known. That brief observation revealed everything I needed to know about where my marriage actually stood. The man had his hands on Rebecca's waist, gradually sliding lower with each movement. She was not pulling away. Instead, she was laughing, her body language open and receptive. As the music intensified, so did their interaction. His fingers traced along her hip, then boldly moved to her thigh, lingering there in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. Rebecca responded by pressing closer, her arm draping around his neck in a manner that went beyond casual friendliness. Something cold and heavy settled in my chest. 15 years of trust began crumbling as I stood there, watching my wife welcome another man's touch with apparent enthusiasm. This was not an accidental brush of contact or a misinterpreted gesture. This was deliberate, conscious, chosen. I abandoned my path toward James and made my way down to the dance floor instead. Neither Rebecca nor her dance partner noticed my approach, so absorbed were they in their exchange. When I finally stood beside them, it took several seconds before Rebecca registered my presence. The recognition dawned on her face like a slow-breaking wave. First surprise, then confusion, and finally something that resembled annoyance rather than guilt. "Michael!" she half shouted over the music. "What are you doing here?" The question struck me as absurd given the circumstances. "I could ask you the same thing," I responded, my voice level despite the turmoil churning inside me. "This does not look like a work function." The man beside her straightened, retaining a proprietary hand on her lower back. "Friend of yours, Becca?" he asked with an easy confidence that suggested he had nothing to hide, or believed he had nothing to fear. "This is my husband, Michael," Rebecca said, her tone carrying an edge of defensiveness. "Michael, this is Eric. He works in digital strategy at Apex Marketing. We were just having some fun." Eric extended his hand with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Nice to meet you, man. Becca has been telling us about her work projects. Impressive stuff." I ignored his outstretched hand. "Interesting. She has never mentioned you." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Do not start, Michael. We are just dancing and having a good time. Everyone here is from work or client companies." I glanced around, noting several faces I recognized from Rebecca's office holiday parties and corporate events. They were watching our interaction with barely concealed interest, some already whispering behind cocktail glasses. Whatever happened next would have an audience, a fact that Rebecca seemed acutely aware of as she plastered on a smile. "Why do not you join us?" she suggested, though her tone made it clear this was not what she actually wanted. "There are some people here you should meet. Networking opportunities." "I think I have seen enough networking for one night," I replied, my voice still calm despite the anger building beneath the surface. "James Donnelly and some clients are upstairs. I will be with them if you need a ride home later." I turned and walked away before she could respond, feeling her eyes boring into my back. As I rejoined James in the VIP section, he gave me a questioning look. "Everything okay? You look like you just took a punch to the gut." "Just saw something I wish I had not," I answered vaguely, ordering a scotch from the waitress. James, to his credit, did not press further, instead introducing me to the clients and steering the conversation toward an upcoming waterfront development project. I participated mechanically, offering insights and answering questions, while my mind remained fixed on the scene playing out on the dance floor below. Rebecca had resumed dancing with Eric, though with noticeably more restraint than before. Occasionally, she would glance up toward our section, her expression unreadable from that distance. Around midnight, I watched as she collected her purse from a table and made her way toward the exit with several coworkers, pointedly not looking in my direction. I stayed until nearly 1, maintaining professional conversation while internally processing what I had witnessed. When I finally drove home, the house was dark and silent. Rebecca's car was in the driveway, but there were no lights on in our bedroom. I found her in the guest room, apparently asleep, though the tension in her shoulders suggested otherwise. I did not disturb her. Instead, I showered and settled into our bed alone, staring at the ceiling as I replayed the events of the evening. Sleep did not come easily. The confrontation I had anticipated did not materialize the next morning. Rebecca was up early, dressed in running clothes, claiming a need for fresh air and exercise. "We can talk later," she said briskly on her way out, clearly establishing control over when and how our inevitable discussion would occur. I used the time to collect my thoughts, to ensure that when we did speak, I would be clear and direct rather than emotional and accusatory. That plan was derailed shortly after 9 when my phone buzzed with a message from Thomas Wilson, a friend who worked at Rebecca's company in the legal department. "You might want to see this," the text read, followed by a video attachment. "Making rounds at the office. Thought you should know before everyone else does." The 12-second clip had been taken at elevation, clearly before my arrival. It showed Rebecca and Eric in an even more compromising situation than what I had witnessed. His hands were exploring her body with a familiarity that suggested this was not their first encounter, while she responded with enthusiastic encouragement, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh and pull her closer. At one point, she guided his hand to her breast, a gesture so deliberate it left no room for misinterpretation. I felt physically ill watching it, but I forced myself to view it twice more, making sure I was not misconstruing what I was seeing. Then I forwarded the video to my personal email, knowing it might be needed later. Rebecca returned from her run nearly 2 hours later, her composed expression suggesting she had used the time to construct her narrative. She found me in the kitchen, my laptop open to emails I had been attempting to answer without success. "We should talk about last night," she began, pouring herself a glass of water as if this were a casual Sunday conversation. "Yes, we should." I turned my laptop toward her and pressed play on the video. The color drained from her face as she watched, her carefully prepared script suddenly useless. When it ended, she stared at the screen for several long moments before meeting my eyes. "Where did you get that?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does it matter? It is apparently circulating among your colleagues. How long do you think before it reaches clients? Partners? Sophia's friends' parents?" Rebecca set down her water glass with a trembling hand. "It is not what it looks like, Michael." "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I saw last night, only worse. It looks like my wife behaving like she is single and available. It looks like a complete disregard for our marriage." "You are overreacting," she countered, though the accusation lacked conviction. "We were dancing. People dance at clubs. It was meaningless." "That was not dancing, Rebecca. That was a public display that would embarrass any self-respecting husband. And your response now, trying to minimize it instead of acknowledging how inappropriate it was, that might be even worse than what you did." She switched tactics, her expression hardening. "So I am not allowed to have fun without your supervision? This is exactly why I did not tell you I was going to the club. You have always been controlling about who I spend time with, always questioning my colleagues and friends." The accusation was so wildly inaccurate, it momentarily left me speechless. Throughout our marriage, I had been supportive of her independence, never questioning her social circles or placing restrictions on her activities. Her attempt to reframe the narrative as one of my controlling behavior rather than her inappropriate actions clarified something essential about where we stood. "This conversation is over," I said quietly, "not because I am controlling, but because you are clearly not prepared to have an honest discussion about what happened. When you are ready to acknowledge reality instead of creating fictional problems to deflect from your behavior, let me know." I closed my laptop and left the room, ignoring her calls to come back and be reasonable. There was nothing reasonable about gaslighting, and I refused to engage with it. The rest of the weekend passed in a cold war of silent meals and stilted interactions whenever Sophia was present. We maintained a facade of normalcy for our daughter's benefit, though her perceptive glances suggested she sensed the tension beneath our forced politeness. By Monday morning, the situation had escalated beyond our private conflict. Rebecca received an email from her HR department requesting a meeting that afternoon. The video, it seemed, had indeed made the rounds at her company, raising questions about professional conduct, given that Eric was technically in a vendor relationship with her department. She left for work ashen-faced, the reality of her actions' consequences beginning to sink in. That evening, when Rebecca returned home, the full magnitude of the professional fallout became apparent. She stormed into the house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the windows. Sophia, who had been working on homework at the kitchen table, looked up with alarm. "Sweetie, could you please finish that upstairs?" I suggested, recognizing the brewing storm in Rebecca's expression. "Your mother and I need to talk." Sophia gathered her books quickly, casting a worried glance between us before disappearing upstairs. The moment we heard her bedroom door close, Rebecca unleashed her fury. "Are you satisfied now?" she hissed, dropping her purse and coat unceremoniously on the counter. "My entire professional reputation is in tatters because of that video." "Your reputation is damaged because of your actions in that video," I corrected calmly. "Not because the video exists." She paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "The company has placed me on administrative leave pending an ethics review." "Administrative leave, Michael. Do you have any idea what that means for my career? The promotion I have been working toward for 3 years is gone. The client accounts I built from nothing have been reassigned. My team was instructed not to communicate with me while the review is ongoing." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for the professional consequences she was facing. I am genuinely sorry about your career setback, Rebecca, but surely you understand that none of this was my doing. You could have kept this private between us, she argued, her voice rising. Instead, you discussed it with colleagues. Spread the video. Stop right there, I interrupted, my sympathy evaporating. I did not share that video with anyone. Thomas sent it to me because it was already circulating. If you want to blame someone for your professional embarrassment, blame whoever recorded it. Or better yet, take responsibility for giving them something to record in the first place. Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger. You are actually enjoying this, or not you? Seeing me suffer, watching everything I have worked for crumble. The accusation stung precisely because it was so far from the truth. Despite my anger and disappointment, I took no pleasure in her humiliation. That is unfair and untrue. I have never wanted to see you suffer, Rebecca. I simply wanted honesty and accountability. Honesty? She laughed bitterly. You want me to honestly explain why dancing with a colleague has become grounds for destroying our marriage? Why a moment of flirtation outweighs 15 years together? It was not just dancing, and we both know it. But even if that were all it was, your response has revealed far more about the state of our marriage than what happened at the club. The next morning brought new complications. Rebecca's phone rang during breakfast, her mother calling from Connecticut with panic in her voice. Apparently, someone had forwarded the video to several family members overnight. Rebecca took the call in the home office, but her raised voice carried through the closed door. I do not care how you got it, Mom. Just delete it. No, Michael did not send it to you. Yes, I understand how it looks, but there is context you are missing. No, that is not what happened. Can we please discuss this later? When she emerged 30 minutes later, her face was blotchy from crying, eyes ringed with red. She avoided looking at me as she gathered her purse and keys. My parents received the video, she stated flatly. So did my brother, 2 cousins, and my godmother. Apparently someone thought my entire extended family needed to see me humiliated. Though I had nothing to do with the video's wider distribution, her accusatory tone suggested she believed otherwise. I am sorry your family is involved now, I said truthfully. That was never my intention. She stared at me with naked hostility. This is going to destroy everything. My reputation, my career, my relationships, all because you could not handle seeing me have a little fun. The persistent refusal to acknowledge her role in the situation pushed me past sympathy into cold resolve. Your definition of fun is the problem here, Rebecca, not my reaction to it. She left without further comment, the slam of the front door punctuating her exit. Later that day, I received calls from both her father and brother, her father expressing his disappointment in Rebecca's behavior, her brother demanding to know if I had intentionally circulated the video as some form of revenge. I had nothing to do with distributing that video, I told her brother firmly, but perhaps this conversation should be with Rebecca about her choices rather than with me about who saw the evidence of them. While Rebecca was gone, I contacted Andrew Morrison, a divorce attorney who had represented my brother during his separation 3 years earlier. I scheduled a consultation for Wednesday, giving myself time to gather financial documents and consider my approach. Are you absolutely certain this is the direction you want to take? Andrew asked when I explained the situation. One indiscretion, however public, does not necessarily mean the marriage cannot be salvaged. It is not just the incident, I explained. It is her response to being confronted, the denial, the attempt to shift blame, the complete lack of accountability. That reveals something fundamental about her character and how she views our relationship. Andrew nodded thoughtfully. I understand. Just be prepared. Divorce is rarely clean or simple, especially with a child involved. If you proceed, we will need to establish grounds. Pennsylvania recognizes both fault and no-fault grounds. I am not looking to punish Rebecca, I clarified. I simply cannot remain in a marriage where there is such a profound breach of trust and respect. File on no-fault grounds. Irreconcilable differences. That evening, Rebecca returned home looking drained. The HR meeting had resulted in a formal warning, with the company citing concerns about potential conflicts of interest and professional boundaries. Eric, I learned, had received similar reprimands from his own employer. This is destroying my professional reputation, she said accusingly as we stood in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones to prevent Sophia from overhearing. People are treating me differently, whispering when I walk by. Actions have consequences, I responded, feeling no satisfaction in her discomfort despite my anger. What did you expect would happen in the age of smartphones and social media? I expected my husband to support me instead of judging me for one mistake, she snapped. Everyone deserves a second chance, Michael. 15 years of marriage should count for something. It counted for everything, I replied quietly, which is why your betrayal cuts so deep. And it was not a mistake, Rebecca. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something thoughtless in an argument. What you did was a series of deliberate choices. She stared at me, recognition dawning in her eyes. You are actually considering divorce, are not you? I have a consultation with Andrew Morrison tomorrow. The color drained from her face for the second time in 3 days. You cannot be serious over a dance. This is insane, Michael. Think about Sophia. I am thinking about Sophia, about what example we set for her, about respect in relationships, about integrity, about accountability when we make poor choices. Rebecca's expression shifted from shock to calculation. If you do this, I will fight you every step of the way. Custody, assets, everything. I will tell everyone you were mentally abusive, controlling, that you drove me to seek attention elsewhere. The threat should have angered me, but instead it only confirmed that I was making the right decision. Do what you feel you need to do. The truth tends to reveal itself eventually. I slept in the guest room that night, listening to Rebecca's muffled phone conversations through the wall. Calls to her sister Elizabeth, her mother, 2 close friends. By morning, the battle lines were being drawn as our private conflict expanded to include our extended families and social circles. Elizabeth called me directly, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. How dare you throw away your marriage without even trying to work things out? Rebecca made a mistake, but she loves you. This punitive attitude is exactly why she felt unappreciated in the first place. With all due respect, Elizabeth, you have only heard Rebecca's version of events, and this is between me and your sister. Family does not work that way, Michael. When you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. Similar conversations played out with Rebecca's parents, who had always treated me like a son, and several mutual friends who felt compelled to take sides. My own family rallied around me, particularly after seeing the video, which Rebecca had conveniently omitted from her narrative when seeking sympathy. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior, refusing to engage in the emotional warfare that Rebecca seemed intent on provoking. My focus remained on protecting Sophia from the fallout and ensuring that whatever happened next would be as amicable as possible, despite Rebecca's threats. The meeting with Andrew on Wednesday was productive, but sobering. We discussed asset division, potential custody arrangements, and the likely timeline for proceedings. Pennsylvania required a 90-day waiting period after filing before a no-fault divorce could be finalized, which meant at minimum 3 months of limbo. Given Rebecca's initial reaction, we should prepare for resistance, Andrew advised. She might contest the grounds or drag out negotiations over property division. I suggest you remain in the family home for now, difficult as that might be. Moving out could potentially impact custody considerations later. I nodded, already dreading the prospect of continued cohabitation during this process. What about the video? Will that be relevant in court? For a no-fault divorce, technically no. But if custody becomes contentious, it could speak to judgment and character. Let's not introduce it unless absolutely necessary, though. Courts prefer to keep proceedings as non-adversarial as possible when children are involved. When I returned home that evening, I found Rebecca in an unexpectedly conciliatory mood. She had prepared dinner, my favorite lasagna, and greeted me with a tentative smile. I thought we could talk, she said, gesturing toward the set table. Really talk, without accusations or defensiveness. The abrupt shift from hostility to reconciliation felt calculated rather than genuine, but I agreed to the conversation. Over dinner, Rebecca presented what she clearly believed was a compelling case for working on our marriage. We have built too much together to throw it all away, she argued. I made a serious error in judgment, and I take full responsibility for that. But one bad decision should not erase 15 good years. I noticed her careful language, error in judgment, rather than acknowledging the full scope of her actions and what they represented. Still, I listened as she outlined her proposal. Marriage counseling, greater transparency about her activities, a renewed commitment to our relationship. I do not want to lose you, Michael, she concluded, reaching for my hand across the table. We can rebuild the trust. It will take time, but I am willing to do whatever is necessary. Her apparent sincerity gave me pause. Was I being too rigid, too unforgiving? Should I consider the possibility of reconciliation for Sophia's sake, if nothing else? Those questions remained with me through a restless night, but clarity came unexpectedly the next morning. As I was preparing to leave for work, I overheard Rebecca on the phone in our home office, speaking in hushed tones. He seems to be wavering, she was saying. The dinner approach worked better than confrontation. If I can keep him talking instead of acting, his anger will eventually fade. No, I have not actually admitted to anything specific. That would just give him ammunition if he does file. Trust me, I know how to handle Michael. He has always responded to emotional appeals. Another week of playing the remorseful wife, and he will convince himself that counseling is a reasonable compromise. The calculated manipulation in her words extinguished any lingering doubt. This was not about saving our marriage. It was about controlling the narrative and the outcome. I closed the front door loudly, letting her know I was leaving, and drove to work with a renewed certainty about my decision. That afternoon, I instructed Andrew to proceed with the divorce filing. Rebecca will receive formal notice within 10 business days, he informed me. Be prepared for her reaction when the papers arrive. The notification came on a Tuesday morning via certified mail. I had deliberately not warned Rebecca it was coming, wanting her unfiltered response rather than another performance. She found me in the kitchen that evening, the unopened envelope clutched in her hand, her expression a mix of disbelief and fury. You actually went through with it, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. After everything I said about wanting to fix things? After everything I overheard about your strategy to manipulate me, you mean, I corrected. Your conversation with Elizabeth last week was quite illuminating. Color flooded her cheeks. You were spying on me? I was walking past an open door, but the fact that your immediate concern is about being overheard rather than what you actually said speaks volumes. She slammed the envelope down on the counter. I will not make this easy for you. If you want out so badly, you will pay for it, financially, emotionally, in every way possible. That is your choice, I replied evenly. But consider how your actions will affect Sophia. She deserves parents who can coexist respectfully, even if they are no longer together. Do not you dare use our daughter against me, Rebecca hissed. You are the one destroying her family. I recognized the familiar pattern, deflection, accusation, refusal to acknowledge her role in our current situation. Rather than engaging further, I simply walked away, leaving her with the unopened envelope and her anger. The next morning, Rebecca announced she had retained Patricia Lawson, a divorce attorney known for her aggressive approach in high-profile cases. Patricia thinks I have strong grounds to contest many of your requests, she informed me over coffee, her tone almost triumphant, especially regarding custody and asset division. I did not respond to the provocation, which only seemed to frustrate her further. Throughout the following weeks, the battle escalated on multiple fronts. Rebecca began crafting a public narrative that cast her as the victim of an unreasonably punitive husband. She confided selectively to friends and colleagues, sharing enough details to garner sympathy while omitting crucial information that would undermine her position. The strategy might have been more effective had the video not already circulated among so many in our social and professional circles. As it was, opinions divided largely based on who had seen the actual evidence versus who had heard only Rebecca's carefully curated version of events. What Rebecca had not anticipated, however, was the professional damage the video would continue to inflict. Two major clients of her company expressed concerns about working with a team that included someone of questionable professional boundaries. Her boss called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon to deliver the unwelcome news. The ethics review had concluded, and the company had decided to terminate her employment, effective immediately. She arrived home that day in a state of shock, clutching a cardboard box containing personal items from her desk. When I inquired about what had happened, the dam finally broke. Tears streaming down her face, she admitted the full extent of her professional disgrace. "They fired me," she sobbed, collapsing onto the couch. 15 years with the company, consistently exceeding targets, bringing in millions in revenue, and they discarded me over 12 seconds of video. Though I felt no satisfaction in her distress, the irony was impossible to ignore. 12 seconds that revealed something fundamental about your judgment, I pointed out, just as it did about our marriage. Her tear-streaked face hardened. "You could have defended me, called my boss, explained it was being blown out of proportion. Instead, you just watched as my career imploded. The same way you watched our marriage implode rather than taking responsibility," I countered. "This was never about the video, Rebecca. It was about the choices you made and your refusal to acknowledge them honestly." The professional consequences continued to cascade. Word of her termination spread quickly through her industry network. Former colleagues who had initially expressed sympathy began distancing themselves, concerned about association with professional scandal. Recruiters who had once eagerly pursued her suddenly became unavailable or non-responsive. Job applications submitted to competitor companies mysteriously resulted in automated rejections. "They have blacklisted me," she realized after a particularly demoralizing week of job searching. "Nobody in marketing will touch me now. 15 years of experience, an MBA from Northwestern, a portfolio of successful campaigns, all meaningless because of that video." The financial implications quickly became apparent. Without her executive-level income, our comfortable lifestyle was suddenly precarious. While my salary could cover the mortgage and basic expenses, it could not sustain everything. The country club membership, Sophia's private school tuition, the summer house in Cape Cod, the luxury vehicles. Something would have to give. Rebecca, however, seemed unwilling to acknowledge this new reality. She continued spending as before. Expensive lunches, boutique shopping, salon appointments, as if defying the financial constraints would somehow negate them. When I raised concerns about her expenditures, she became defensive. "So now you are monitoring my spending too?" she snapped. "Controlling every aspect of my life while you systematically destroy it?" "This is not about control," I explained patiently. "It is about financial reality. Without your income, we cannot maintain our current lifestyle. These are simply mathematics, not emotional arguments." Her response was to apply for multiple credit cards without discussing it with me, running up substantial charges that would eventually become part of our contested divorce negotiations. It was as if she were determined to inflict maximum financial damage before any settlement could be reached. Meanwhile, Sophia, perceptive beyond her 13 years, sensed the tension despite our efforts to shield her. "Are you and Mom getting a divorce?" she asked one evening as I helped her with math homework. The directness of the question caught me off guard, though I had been preparing for this conversation. "We are working through some very serious issues," I answered honestly. "And yes, we have begun the legal process of separation." Her face remained carefully neutral. "Because of what happened at that club, the video everyone at school is talking about?" My stomach dropped. "You have heard about the video?" She nodded. "Kaylee Mitchell's older sister works with Mom. She told Kaylee, and now everyone knows." The knowledge that our private conflict had spread to Sophia's school, that she was facing the fallout of her mother's actions among her peers, filled me with a fresh wave of anger toward Rebecca. Not for the original incident, but for her subsequent handling of the situation, which had only expanded its impact. "I am sorry you found out that way," I told Sophia, careful to maintain my composure. "Your mother and I should have talked to you together, protected you better from all this." Sophia shrugged with the practiced indifference teenagers often use to mask deeper feelings. "It is fine. I am not a little kid anymore." "No, but you are still our daughter, and none of this is your fault or your responsibility." I hesitated, then added, "No matter what happens between your mother and me, we both love you. That will never change." She nodded again, returning to her math problems with deliberate focus. The conversation was clearly over for now, but I made a mental note to arrange for Sophia to speak with a family therapist. She needed an impartial person to help her process these changes. The situation at school deteriorated further when a group of parents petitioned to have Rebecca removed from the PTA board, citing concerns about her moral influence on impressionable teenagers. Though the petition failed due to procedural issues, the damage to Rebecca's standing in the community was substantial. Women who had once invited her to book clubs and charity committees suddenly found their groups at capacity. Invitations to social gatherings dwindled, then ceased entirely. "They are treating me like a pariah," Rebecca complained after encountering obvious avoidance at Sophia's school concert. "These same women who have had affairs, who drink too much at every function, who gossip viciously about each other, they suddenly think they can judge me?" "The difference," I suggested carefully, "is that their indiscretions remain private, while yours became public. It is not fair, perhaps, but it is reality." Her isolation deepened as the divorce proceedings continued. Even Elizabeth, who had initially been her staunchest defender, began to withdraw support after viewing the full video and hearing about Rebecca's manipulative tactics. "I love my sister," Elizabeth confided during a rare private conversation, "but I cannot condone how she has handled this situation. The EU video was bad enough, but the lying, the blame shifting, the attempts to damage your reputation, I never thought she was capable of such behavior." When I raised this suggestion with Rebecca later, expecting resistance, I was surprised by her immediate agreement. "Sophia needs support right now. We can at least agree on that." It was the first genuine moment of co-parenting we had managed since the conflict began, a small reminder of the partnership we had once shared before everything fractured. The required 90-day waiting period stretched into 5 months as negotiations stalled over various points of contention. Rebecca initially pushed for primary physical custody of Sophia, citing her role as the primary caregiver throughout our daughter's life. When I countered with a request for 50-50 shared custody, supported by documentation of my consistent involvement in Sophia's daily care and activities, Rebecca shifted focus to financial matters instead. "Rebecca seems to be operating from an outdated understanding of custody determinations," Andrew explained after one particularly tense mediation session. "Courts today generally favor equal involvement from both parents unless there are compelling reasons otherwise. Her attorney surely knows this, which is why they are now focusing on financial leverage." The financial negotiations became a battlefield of competing appraisals and valuations. Our home, my retirement accounts, Rebecca's stock options, the vacation property in Maine, everything was subject to scrutiny and dispute. Rebecca's initial position seemed designed to punish rather than achieve equitable division, demanding assets that had been in my family for generations and making claims that exceeded her legal entitlements under state law. "This is not unusual in the early stages," Andrew assured me as we reviewed her latest proposal. "Most contested divorces begin with extreme positions before gradually working toward the middle ground. The important thing is to remain rational and focused on fair division rather than emotional responses." Throughout this extended conflict, I maintained my resolve to avoid using the video as leverage, despite Rebecca's increasingly antagonistic approach. This changed, however, when she filed a motion questioning my fitness as a parent based on what she characterized as controlling and emotionally abusive behavior patterns. The allegations were not only false, but represented a dangerous escalation that threatened my relationship with Sophia. After consulting with Andrew, we decided to formally enter the video and related evidence into the proceedings, along with sworn statements from mutual friends and colleagues attesting to the actual dynamics of our marriage. The scheduled hearing to address Rebecca's motion became the turning point in our divorce process. 2 days before we were due in court, Patricia Lawson requested an urgent meeting with Andrew. "My client would like to revisit the previously proposed settlement terms," she stated without preamble once we were seated in the conference room. "She believes an agreement may be possible without further court intervention." The revised proposal was remarkably close to what we had initially offered: equal custody, equitable asset division based on contributions during the marriage, and no ongoing financial support in either direction given our comparable incomes. The only addition was a confidentiality clause preventing either party from publicly discussing the circumstances of the divorce. What prompted this sudden reasonableness? I asked Andrew privately after the meeting. My guess? They reviewed the evidence we submitted and recognized the damage it would do to Rebecca's position if aired in open court. Patricia is an experienced attorney. She would have advised Rebecca that proceeding with false allegations in the face of contradictory evidence could potentially impact the judge's rulings on other matters. The settlement agreement was finalized within 2 weeks, ending nearly 6 months of conflict and negotiations. The terms were fair, focusing on Sophia's well-being and an equitable division of what we had built together. The emotional cost, however, had been substantial for everyone involved. On the day the divorce was finalized, I met Rebecca at her attorney's office to sign the final documents. She looked different somehow. The combative energy that had characterized her throughout the proceedings had dissipated, replaced by a subdued weariness that probably mirrored my own. I never wanted it to get this ugly, she said as we waited for our attorneys to prepare the paperwork. I hope you know that. I think we both made choices that led us here, I responded, not unkindly. Mine was to prioritize self-respect and integrity. Yours was to fight rather than acknowledge responsibility. She looked away. That is still how you see it? Even after all this time? How else would you describe what happened? Rebecca was silent for a long moment. I was scared, she finally admitted. When I realized how seriously you were taking the incident, how determined you were to end our marriage over it, I panicked. Fighting seemed easier than facing what I had done. The acknowledgement came too late to change our course, but it represented a small step toward the kind of honest communication we would need to co-parent effectively. 3 months after our divorce was finalized, the professional consequences of Rebecca's actions continued to unfold. She had been formally terminated from her position following the ethics investigation, and despite her qualifications, struggled to secure comparable employment. The video, it seemed, had been more widely shared within the industry than either of us had initially realized. While I took no pleasure in her career difficulties, I recognized them as the natural result of her choices, both at the club and in the aftermath. Actions have consequences, as I had told her that day in our kitchen. Those words now seemed almost prophetic. Rebecca's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Without her executive salary, she could not maintain the lifestyle to which she had become accustomed. The apartment she had leased following our separation, a luxury unit in an exclusive downtown building, was now beyond her means. She had been forced to downsize significantly, moving to a modest 2-bedroom in a less desirable neighborhood. During one of our custody exchanges, Rebecca appeared noticeably disheveled, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that hung loosely on her frame. When Sophia was out of earshot, she confided that she had been diagnosed with depression and was struggling to maintain her mental health amid the cascading losses: marriage, career, social standing, financial stability. I never imagined my life could fall apart so completely, she said, her voice hollow, over one stupid night. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sympathy for her suffering, lingering anger at her betrayal and subsequent manipulation, concern for Sophia's well-being with a mother in crisis. But there was also a certain distance, as if I were observing someone whose choices had set her on an inevitable trajectory toward this moment. Have you considered moving back closer to your family? I suggested, thinking of her parents in Connecticut. The support might be helpful, especially with Sophia's visitation schedule. Rebecca shook her head. They are barely speaking to me since they saw the video. Dad says I brought shame on the family name. Mom just cries whenever we talk. Even her most stalwart defenders had withdrawn their support when confronted with the undeniable evidence of her behavior. Elizabeth, who had been so quick to condemn me in the early days of our separation, now admitted she had been misled about the circumstances and had ceased contact with Rebecca altogether. The isolation became nearly complete when Rebecca's former sorority sisters, with whom she had maintained close friendships for over 20 years, unanimously voted to exclude her from their annual reunion weekend. The official explanation cited scheduling conflicts, but Rebecca learned through a sympathetic friend that several members had objected to her inclusion after seeing the video. These were my closest friends, she told me during another custody exchange, her voice breaking, women who have known me since college, who stood beside me at our wedding, who helped plan Sophia's baby shower, and now they act like I am a stranger. The social rejection was compounded by continued professional setbacks. After nearly 8 months of unemployment, Rebecca had finally secured an interview for a marketing position at a small local firm, only to have the offer rescinded when the hiring manager received an anonymous email containing the infamous video. Whoever sent that video might as well have attached a note saying, "Unemployable," Rebecca said bitterly. "No matter what I do, no matter how qualified I am, that 12 seconds follows me everywhere." In a desperate attempt to rebuild her professional identity, Rebecca invested a substantial portion of her dwindling savings in a marketing consultancy business. She created a professional website, ordered business cards, and began cold contacting potential clients. The effort yielded minimal results, a few small projects from associates who had not yet seen the video, but nothing approaching the stable income she needed. Meanwhile, my own life had stabilized. I had purchased a comfortable home not far from Sophia's school, ensuring minimal disruption to her routine during her time with me. My career continued to advance, with a promotion to Director of Operations that had been in the works before the divorce, but was only finalized after the dust had settled. While I had not actively sought to date, there had been interest from several women in my expanded social circle. Interest I was just beginning to cautiously reciprocate. 6 months after the divorce, Rebecca called me late one evening, her voice thick with tears. "I need your help, Michael. I have been evicted from my apartment. The management company raised the rent beyond what I can afford, and with my credit destroyed by legal fees and debt, I cannot find anywhere else that will accept my application." "Where are you now?" I asked, concerned despite everything. "A motel," she admitted, "but I can only afford a few nights. After that, I do not know what I will do, especially during my weeks with Sophia." The situation represented a significant deterioration from our last interaction. "Have you applied for assistance programs? Reached out to former colleagues?" "I have tried everything," she said, desperation evident in her voice. "Nobody wants to associate with me professionally anymore. That video followed me everywhere, and most of our old friends have chosen their side, yours." The irony was not lost on me. Rebecca, who had once been so confident in her ability to control the narrative and manipulate perceptions, now found herself unable to escape the consequences of her actions. The very social and professional networks she had attempted to turn against me had ultimately rejected her instead, recognizing the authenticity of my position versus the calculated nature of hers. "I can help you find a temporary arrangement," I offered, more for Sophia's sake than Rebecca's. "But long-term, you need to rebuild your life independently." "I know," she whispered. "I just never thought it would come to this, that everything could be destroyed so completely by one mistake." "It was never about one mistake," I reminded her gently. "It was about the choices you made afterward, the lies, the manipulation, the attempts to damage my reputation, rather than accept responsibility for your actions. Those were the real destroyers." Rebecca's silence acknowledged the truth in my words. I arranged for her to stay in a modest apartment owned by a business acquaintance who occasionally rented to corporate clients. The rent was reasonable, the location acceptable for Sophia's school commute, and most importantly, the landlord was willing to overlook Rebecca's credit issues based on my personal voucher. It was not charity, she would pay her own way, but rather a pragmatic solution to ensure our daughter's mother maintained stable housing. When I shared the situation with Sophia's therapist during our next parent consultation, Dr. Mitchell noted that the dramatic reversal in Rebecca's circumstances might actually be beneficial for Sophia in the long run. "Children learn not just from what we tell them, but from what they observe," she explained. "Sophia is witnessing firsthand that actions have consequences, that character matters, and that integrity is worth more than momentary gratification. These are powerful lessons that will shape her own values and choices as she grows." The final chapter of Rebecca's downfall came unexpectedly. Eric, her dance partner from that fateful night, published a tell-all article in a popular online business magazine, detailing what he characterized as a pattern of inappropriate professional relationships that had culminated in the notorious video. Though he never named Rebecca directly, his description left little doubt about her identity. The article revealed that their interaction that night had not been spontaneous, but rather the continuation of flirtation that had been building across several professional events. Even more damaging, Eric implied that Rebecca had suggested their public display might generate useful gossip currency in industry circles, potentially benefiting both their careers through increased visibility. She told me her husband was completely clueless, Eric wrote, that he trusted her implicitly and would never question her activities. There was something disturbing about the satisfaction in her voice when she said this, as if his trust was a weakness she enjoyed exploiting. Whether Eric's account was entirely accurate or embellished for maximum impact was impossible to determine. What mattered was the complete destruction of whatever professional credibility Rebecca might have retained. The article was shared thousands of times across business and marketing networks, effectively ensuring that her name would forever be associated with professional misconduct and personal betrayal. When the article appeared, Rebecca called me in a state of frantic distress. "He is lying," she insisted, "twisting everything to make himself look better. I never said those things about you." "Does it matter anymore?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. "The narrative has been set. Fighting it now would only draw more attention to the whole situation." Her defeated silence spoke volumes. The battle was over. The consequences had played out to their natural conclusion. Whatever future Rebecca might build would need to be created from the ashes of her former life. A year after our divorce was finalized, Rebecca's circumstances had stabilized, though at a level far below her previous standard of living. She had secured an entry-level position at a small marketing firm, work well beneath her qualifications, but the only opportunity available given her tarnished professional reputation. Her apartment, while comfortable enough, bore no resemblance to the luxury home we had once shared. Her social circle had contracted dramatically, with most of our mutual friends maintaining connections with me while distancing themselves from her. During one of Sophia's school events, a band concert where we found ourselves seated side by side, Rebecca leaned over and whispered, "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if you had been willing to forgive one moment of poor judgment?" I considered her question seriously before responding. "It was never about forgiveness, Rebecca. It was about recognizing that the incident revealed something fundamental about your character, something confirmed by everything that happened afterward. Forgiveness would not have changed that reality." She nodded slowly, a resigned acceptance in her expression. "You were always the stronger one," she admitted. "I just never realized it until I lost everything." As I watched our daughter perform on stage, confident, poised, undamaged, despite the turbulence of the past year, I felt no triumph in Rebecca's downfall. There was only the quiet certainty that I had made the right choice in prioritizing self-respect over appearances, in showing Sophia through my actions, rather than just my words, what it meant to live with integrity. If you like this story, please click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a nice rest.